The only thing we can prove is that no one will be held accountable for the death of Kate Steinle. The man, a 5-time illegal immigrant, was released by a sanctuary city. Somehow, at some time, he acquires a firearm, and that firearm ends the life of a young woman in her father's arms. That's all we can prove. There was no struggle, there was no argument, just a gunshot and a dead body. A death that no one is responsible for, even though the man was found guilty of being in possession of that firearm. So what does it all mean? Where do we go from here? Well, the case is opening many questions that frankly will never be answered with any level of certainty. The thing that I want to know is, where are all the gun control people? Welcome, everybody. Okay, there we go. I don't know if this is going to work or not. I have a feeling that my audio's not going to be where it needs to be. But, hey, we'll figure it out, right? Welcome to the show, Michael Newman Show. Please go to the website, michaelnewmanproductions.com. You know what's going on with that deal. And you can also check me out on Twitter, Newmaniac1, and support the show, please, please, please. Haven't been doing a show for the past couple of weeks. Well, Thanksgiving and all that, I drove to see some family. It was about 9 hours away, and took a couple of days off, and then I had to do some real work in the meantime. But I'm back now, yay! And thank you for tuning into the show. So the big news is the verdict came out, and the man that was involved in the Kate Steinle murder way back in 2015 was acquitted. Jurors on Thursday acquitted the illegal immigrant accused of killing Kate Steinle as she walked with her father on a crowded San Francisco pier of all charges except for felony possession of a firearm. This is important, okay? It's very interesting that he was found guilty of being in possession of said firearm, but I guess not in control of it. It was an accident. And the story of how he gained possession of the firearm is, well, dubious. And if it's not dubious, well, then it should be frightening for both you and me. There's a lot of reports out there. This is from one of the local news stations, what they had to say about it.
2 years after Kate Steinle was killed on Pier 14, the only guilty verdict for Mr. Zarate was for being a felon in possession of a firearm.
The verdict that came in today was not one we were hoping for.
Public defender Matt Gonzalez argued that the gun went off accidentally before a bullet ricocheted off the concrete pier and struck Steinle in the back. It was the first time a ricochet bullet case was charged as a first-degree murder in San Francisco.
This case made its way to a trial courtroom for a reason. It made its way through a trial courtroom because at every stage there was sufficient evidence necessary to go to court.
Okay, and that may be the truth. That's the prosecutor there. That may be the truth, but it also may be that he's attempting to save face in the fact that he lost the case, that it seems like everybody felt that he should win. So who knows what's going on there. But I don't know that we as a population are really going to know anything until this whole thing is over and we start getting the actual arguments of the case, the actual evidence of the case, the arguments of the case, and then we can start to determine how we would have judged this case based on the evidence at hand. At this point in time, it's sort of hearsay. As a matter of fact, I will admit I knew of this case long ago, but I'd never really delved deeply into it. And I was not aware that this was just a family walking down a pier. I didn't know that. And then this whole thing sort of happened in broad daylight. I just assumed that the guy was somehow caught stealing the firearm from the federal agent, and because that's a story that I had heard, and that he killed this woman in cold blood. Maybe he was trying to attack her, steal from her, rape her, whatever it was, ended up killing her in cold blood. That's what I thought it was. Pretty open and shut case. But apparently That's not actually what happened.
Go to trial.
The gun used to kill Steinle was the secondary weapon of an employee of the Bureau of Land Management. It was stolen from his car in San Francisco, where it was not properly secured. Zarate said he found the gun wrapped in a T-shirt under a bench and admitted he was responsible for Steinle's death.
So who knows if that's true or not? I mean, these are the arguments that are being brought forth by the defense in this case. Now, could it be that the defense told him to shut up, don't say anything, don't talk to anyone, and let me handle it, looked at the prosecutor's case and realized that there was no evidence to link this man to the theft of that weapon? Maybe there was no fingerprints or anything on the car. I believe it was in a car. And so there was no way to place him at the scene of the theft. Thereby, they can come up with any reason in the world why that gun would be where it was, and they just came up with a reason that this gun was wrapped up in it was wrapped in swaddling clothes and stuffed underneath a bench. Why anyone would do that, I have no idea. Once again, we're going to have to see what evidence. I would like to know what evidence was admitted and what evidence was not admitted as well. Whose fingerprints were on the firearm? Where was the gun stolen? When was it stolen? Whose fingerprints were on that item? You know, what sort of depth did we go in the investigation into how he procured said firearm? But even if that were the case, even we can say for 100% certain that he stole the firearm, I still don't know if it leads us to a murder here. According to the defense attorney, today is a vindication for the rights of immigrants. Nothing about this case and the man's ethnicity or immigration status was relevant in the case. With the arguments that were made, you would have to agree with that. You would have to agree that, there wasn't anything in the case that had anything to do with his immigration status, because the way the argument was crafted was, this is just a guy who happens to be illegal that sat down on a park bench and feels something underneath him. Was, what is this? And he pulls it out to take a look at it. He sees that there's a gun. He drops it. It goes off and shoots this woman. Could have been anybody. Could have been anybody. So that is the argument that was crafted. Is it believable? Well, apparently it was to the jury there. They certainly believed it, but I don't know if I buy that for a second. But we continue. Acquitted defendant Jose. He was acquitted of first and second degree murder and involuntary manslaughter, as well as assault with a semi-automatic weapon. I could have been assault with a deadly weapon. It's probably different in California because of their laws. So, first and second degree murder. Well, murder requires what? A motive. It requires intent. You meant to go kill someone. That would be hard to prove in this case. Was there any background between this woman and this man? No. Would have been if this was a murder, would it have been a very smart murder? I mean, just right out there on the pier where everybody's going to see you? Probably not. He was found guilty of illegal firearms possession, which carries a sentence of 16 months to 3 years. Okay, so he was found guilty of illegal firearms possession. Okay. Apparently, they bought some of the defense's story, right? So what parts did they buy and what parts did they not buy? Because if they bought the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker, with this guy just sat down on a park bench and saw, well, what is in this strange thing of clothing here? Could be a puppy. I don't know. So you pick it out and it's not moving. Maybe it's a dead puppy. Who knows? And you pull it out and it's a firearm, and he drops it and it goes off. Right? That's his story. But the jury found him guilty of possession of a firearm, a felon with possession of a firearm. Is that all it takes to get possession of a firearm? To be simply in the room? Right? Because that's kind of a dangerous thing. Oh, I somebody dropped cocaine on my driveway, and it was under some leaves or something. I didn't know it was there. It's been there for a couple of weeks or whatever. And then the cops drive by and they go, oh, there's cocaine here. Then they knock down my door with a SWAT team and get me for distribution. Well, wait a second. I didn't know it was there. If I was going to distribute, I would probably put it in little baggies or whatever. I didn't do that. I'm certainly not going to store it in the front yard. Oh, no. It was around you. It was close enough to you for you to have possession. So that's kind of a strange thing here. But as far as the murder charge goes, some attorneys agree with me that it's going to be very difficult to prove murder.
It is always very difficult in cases like this to figure out what the defendant was thinking. Whenever we're dealing with intent, we have to imagine what another person wanted or thought or expected. And since we are not that person, that is very, very hard to do.
Exactly. It's very, very hard to do, to figure out what exactly that person was thinking about at the time. Now, there was an exchange here between a local anchor and, well, I guess another local anchor, a political correspondent for the local TV station there, and she's an attorney. I thought it was a pretty good exchange because it goes to the vagary that was actually within this case.
PIX5 political reporter Melissa Kane joins us now. You're also an attorney and watched kind of in amazement down in that newsroom this verdict as it came in, because I don't think anyone predicted this one. Did it surprise you?
Yes, it did. I was one of the people who did not prepare for this kind of outcome. We know that he had the gun in his possession, that it was the gun that fired the bullet that ultimately killed Miss Steinle. And what the defense was arguing is that this was a freak accident. And those kinds of accidents just seem to, I think, those of us who are watching, as sort of a red herring, not enough to constitute reasonable doubt. But it looks like inside that courtroom, the defense was able to put together enough of these kinds of facts and these kind of incidents that have happened before where the gun has gone off to sort of add up to a reasonable doubt for these folks.
Well, and I don't think anybody really knows what the prosecution's case was. Not specifically. I don't know how closely people have been following this. I don't know if there have been cameras in the courtroom. Like the OJ trial, I don't know what it is. Like I said, frankly, I didn't even know this case was still going on. This murder happened in 2015. I just assumed the guy was in the clink or had been deported. I didn't realize it was still going on because there's so many other news stories to contend with on a daily basis that I hadn't been following this one. Probably should have, because the outcome is baffling a lot of people. I think if we had more firsthand knowledge of what actually was happening within the courtroom, it might not be as baffling, because this is a pretty tough case. So
he's convicted of being in possession illegally of a firearm, but I think what's going to frustrate people is that there's a victim here. Somebody died as a result of this.
This is important to remember. Somebody died as a result of this.
I don't know if you want to call it negligence. I don't know if you call it an accident, but there's a person dead, and there's nobody really being brought to bear to answer to that crime.
Well, yeah, one of the things that the defense argued was, none of this is going to bring Miss Steinle back. Finding him guilty or making sure he goes to jail for a long period of time is not the thing that's going to bring her back. And
that's not really a good argument. Well, none of this is going to bring him back. Well, that really doesn't matter, right? Because it's about punishing people for a crime, creating a precedent that may dissuade someone else from committing the same crime. Everybody knows that putting this guy in prison is not going to bring her back, right? And by the way, letting him go, it's not going to bring her back. It's just not a real good argument to bring up in court.
And we do have this really frustrating issue of no real motive in this case. I think the prosecution really wrestled with trying to figure out, how do you explain the why, which is a very human thing that I think the jurors wanted to know, and that we generally would like to know. But when you have someone who's never seen this person before, it seems just totally random. It's hard to explain, sort of any kind of ill intent on the part of the shooter. shooter.
Right. And it's not just that the people want to know and the jurors kind of wanted to know. No, it's integral to the case. You can't have a murder without some sort of intent, maybe second degree, involuntary, something, whatever, but not murder. Not murder in the first degree. I mean, murder in the first degree requires somebody thinking it out and wanting to kill somebody else. That is a murder. Right. So without intent, without being able to prove intent or be able to get in the mind of the assailant here, the shooter here, you can't really prove intent or motive in this case. It just seemed like this was a random shooting for no reason.
I think in defense of the jury, not only the why, but also the how. I think that was up for debate. Did it go off by itself? There's no safety on this Sig Sauer weapon. Did he drop it? Did he point it? There are a lot of unanswered questions, and maybe that jury felt like they could not be certain about any of the facts in this case.
That seems to be the case, that you add up, the gun comes from nowhere, it's sitting there, maybe not, it's got the safety on, to your point, maybe not, there's a gun there's a bullet in the chamber.
Did they ever ask if it was cocked? Because that SIG, what is it, a P238? Is that what it is? 239. It's a 40 caliber P239. That is a single double action firearm, meaning it's a semi-automatic firearm that once you rack it, meaning you cock it to move a round from the magazine into the firing chamber, it has a hammer on the back that is cocked back. This gun actually has a decocking mechanism. So you can take the gun, you can load it, cock, lock, and ready to rock, then decock it. Click. And all it does is take that hammer, that spring-loaded hammer that creates the force requisite to shove the firing pin in hard enough to set off that bullet. You can decock that hammer. So it ain't going to go off until you completely depress the trigger. And when you're doing that, right, that's in double action mode, the first round that goes off requires a significantly higher amount of force than every other round that goes off, because not only are you're not just releasing the hammer, you're having to cock it back with your finger at the same time. So it may be 12, 14 pounds of pressure on the first round, whereas the next rounds may go off with 4 or 6. So it's a very big difference. And if that gun wasn't cocked, I don't know of any way it could go off, that you could put that much pressure against the trigger for it to fully cock and fire without having your hand on it, doing it intentionally.
So it's ready to go and, sort of go off at the slightest provocation. So certainly, again, so you add up all of those tiny issues, they can be a big chunk of reasonable doubt that can make for a really difficult time prosecuting a case like this.
So in reality, the case is a very difficult one to prosecute from a murder standpoint. But. There's another thing going on here. Well, hold on. Let me say a couple of things before we get into my question of where are the gun people. Of course, the politics around here are he should have been found guilty because he's an illegal immigrant. Immigration and Customs Enforcement deputy released a statement on Thursday blaming San Francisco's sanctuary city policy for the death of Kate Steinle after the shocking verdict was handed down in the case on Thursday. Well, I guess you could say that, but the argument created by the defense in this case makes the immigration status of the person irrelevant, right? Because it could have been anyone that would sit down on that bench would probably notice that there was something sitting there and would have picked it up and would have been the assailant in that situation. It could have been anyone. And just because the guy was an illegal immigrant doesn't mean that he was a cold-blooded murderer, right? That's sort of the argument coming from the defense. And it's hard to dissuade that argument. There are some weird things going on here, like the ranger whose firearm was stolen was never really asked too many questions about this. Apparently, the defense is arguing, well, of course, the guy found this gun wrapped in a T-shirt or some kind of cloth on the San Francisco Pier 14, and it accidentally fired before he knew what he was holding. The prosecution is arguing that the man knew what he was doing and intended the fatal shot. Now, in questioning this officer, he says, I don't believe that we ever had a discussion during the interview. Of course, the officer was interviewed about, what happened with his gun, his role in the case, but he was never asked about the gun. He's being protected by somebody for some reason, which is interesting because his only role in this case was as the person that through negligence provided the firearm. So when I read this, it's from another local station there, I thought to myself, well, that's weird. Who's protecting what for whom? Is it a good idea that he didn't talk? I don't know. I don't know. So what do we know? We know that he is apparently, the assailant was apparently in possession. Possession is a very important word here, of the firearm. Okay, he was a felon in possession of the firearm. He was convicted of that. And from criminal law, freeadvice.com. I, of course, have that bookmarked. Go there quite often. Felon in possession of a firearm charge requires law enforcement to prove that a person is a felon and that he knowingly possessed a firearm. Knowingly possessed a firearm, much like proving that someone possessed a controlled substance. The first step for a felon in possession of a firearm charge is to prove possession. The state and jury can review the factors determining if there is enough links from the gun to the defendant. For example, if the gun was found in the trunk of a vehicle, then the state would need to prove that the defendant had knowledge of the gun in the trunk area. Okay, well, that's kind of, in my opinion, where this question of possession comes in. How was he, if one were to buy his story, how exactly is he then guilty of possession? Right? He's saying he didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I didn't see anything. It was a gun. A gun went off. Okay, well, they bought the rest of your story, but they apparently didn't buy that part. Okay, so what is possession? I broke out my handy-dandy little Black's Law dictionary. Don't ask me why I have one of those. It cost me like $80. I just looked up possession. Fact of having or holding property in one's power. The exercise of dominion over property. The right under which anyone can exercise control over something to the exclusion of all others. The continuing exercise of a claim to exclusive use of a material object. The fact of having or holding property in one's power. Is that all it takes for you to be in possession? Right? I mean, possession of a controlled substance could be a felony, depending on how much it is. And if you pick something up and there happens to be cocaine in it, you don't know what it is. Does that mean all you have to do is touch it and put it in your hand and then you were guilty of that crime? If that is the case, that is a very scary way to interpret the law. So let's just assume he's in possession of a firearm. Gun control people, wake up. Here's your argument for common sense gun legislation. As a matter of fact, this is common sense gun legislation that I would agree with. So he's got the gun, and somehow it goes off and someone's dead. He's in possession. He's in control of said firearm. Whether he's supposed to be in control of it as a felon or not, he is apparently in control of the firearm, and now someone's dead. Did he do it on purpose? Well, let's just say no. He's a guy that is a felon. He even throw out the felon. The guy has a firearm. He's sitting in his front room and he's cleaning the firearm. Somehow it goes off and kills somebody. Is he not responsible for that? If you're in possession of a deadly weapon and it kills someone, you would think you would be responsible for that in one way, shape, or form. Voluntary manslaughter is also a charge that he was acquitted of. In most jurisdictions, voluntary manslaughter consists of an intentional killing that is accomplished by additional circumstances that mitigate but do not excuse the killing. The most common type of voluntary manslaughter occurs when a defendant is provoked to commit the homicide. So we're talking about voluntary manslaughter here. We're talking crimes of passion. That's not what he was, there was no intent. That's not what he was charged with. He was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Now, that's different. Involuntary manslaughter is the unlawful killing of another human being without intent. Okay, you kill somebody you didn't mean to. The absence of intent element is essential difference between voluntary and involuntary manslaughter. And in most states, involuntary manslaughter does not result from a heat of passion, but from an improper use of reasonable care or skill while in commission of a lawful actor or act while of a lawful act. So whatever you're doing, you're just doing something and you're stupid and somebody dies. You didn't mean to kill anybody. There was no, you didn't have death on the brain, but the person died. So generally there are two types of involuntary manslaughter: criminal negligent manslaughter and unlawful act manslaughter. The first occurs when death is a result of a high degree of negligence or recklessness, and the second occurs when the death is caused by one who commits attempts to commit an unlawful act, usually a misdemeanor. So you're either negligent or you made a mistake while in the commission of a crime. This guy was in possession of a firearm, and whether or not he meant to kill somebody or not, he killed somebody. I would think, that's involuntary manslaughter. As a matter of fact, I was floored that that's not necessarily involuntary manslaughter. I always thought, if I've got my gun or whatever it is, and I'm cleaning it in front of people or somebody around, or maybe I'm not even cleaning it in front of people, I'm just cleaning it and it goes through a wall and shoots somebody, then I'm going to have to pay the piper, man. I'm going to jail. That's what I thought. Not necessarily the case, apparently. And this is out of California. And we're not hearing any of the gun control people out there in California. I mean, they've got some of the toughest gun control laws in the nation. They really want to be that state that wants to be seen as fighting gun death or fighting gun violence or fighting guns. But we're not hearing from those people. Here's one from CBS News out of Florida. Last month, Florida prosecutors decided not to press charges against the man who fatally shot his pregnant friend while showing off one of his guns. His name is William. He has a .22 caliber handgun. It went off after he spun it around his finger. Okay, he's got the gun. Hey, look at this. And it goes off, and it shoots this lady, Catherine, in the head, killing her. Her unborn son died as well. Hoover's mother testified in a petition on change.org asking for prosecutors to reconsider the decision not to charge the man. Prosecutors said, accidental discharge of a firearm causing death, even if the result of gross negligence, cannot be prosecuted criminally, he wrote. According to Florida's assistant attorney general, apparently, in order to rise to the level of a crime in Florida, an unintentional shooting must meet the standard of culpable negligence. Okay? Culpable negligence, showing reckless disregard for human life. Not just being an asshole? Apparently not. More than asshole is required. He said, apparently, if he had pulled the trigger of the gun intentionally, for example, thinking that the firearm was unloaded, and it went off, then they could get him. Or if he had been drunk or under the influence of drugs when the shooting occurred. Then they could get him. But he wasn't drunk. He just did something stupid and somebody died. I don't particularly like that. Do you? Gun control people? Everybody else? Responsible gun owners? Should that be the way things are? You can be an idiot as long as you haven't been drinking. I mean, the person's just as dead, but it's not really a crime unless you've been boozing it up. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Right? I mean, the person's just as dead. You were just as stupid as if you had been drinking. You did the same sort of thing that you might have done while you were drinking, and someone's dead. If you do something stupid, sober, and kill someone, I think that's worse. Isn't it? Because you did something really stupid with all of your faculties. Meaning that there's no way you should ever be allowed to have a firearm again, and you should probably be taught a lesson cognitively while you're sober that you're an idiot. So there you go, gun control people. There's a real argument. Why is it then that there are these circumstances by which people are not held responsible for their conduct with a firearm? Could we not, if we wish to reduce the number of gun deaths and things that happen with firearms that are accidents, this is something that we could legislate and say, look, if you have a firearm and you screw up with it and somebody dies, you're done. And that is the law. We will follow that law and we'll make an example out of you because this conduct where people are getting killed for no good reason because people are being stupid with firearms is unacceptable. If you can't accept that responsibility, then you don't get a gun. You can just say, okay, well, I don't want that responsibility. I'm not smart enough. I'm not going to get a firearm. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But understand, if you do get a firearm, we will hold you to this standard because it is important in society to prevent people from dying needlessly from stupid people with firearms. Sounds like common sense gun legislation to me. It sounds like something that people in California or San Francisco, a place where you can't even get a firearm to carry around, you can barely get any firearm for that matter. They're really good on their gun control. You would think that they would want to adopt this sort of common sense gun legislation. So what is going on with this case? I don't know. We're going to have to sit back and see what actually happens into the future with this deal. I'm a little concerned that there could be some broader implications for the intrusion of government into criminal cases, meaning it would not have been good at all, not just for San Francisco, but for all sanctuary cities, counties, states, whatever they might be, for this case to come out as a murder. Not have been good. Or manslaughter or anything like that. It would have taken a big bite out of their argument, their righteous argument to let illegal immigrants continue to exist within their jurisdictions. And I don't know that this case was ever going to come out with any verdict but this. That's my conspiratorial side. Saying that this was predetermined and it is what it is. Do I have any evidence of that? Nothing but experience. And recognizing that there is a motive, that these states and these municipalities do have a motive. And think about this. If it was a murder situation, this would have created a precedent by which the chief responsibility doesn't actually lie with the murderer, but it lies with the people who allowed the murderer to continue to exist. This is a person that they had in a jail cell. This is a person that was released after a stint in the pokey, and the federal government said, hey, hold this guy so we can deport him, and they refused to do so. Had they not refused to do so, then this person would not be in the country and potentially not kill anyone. Had he been found guilty of murder, then at least in the court of public opinion, you would have the headline that says sanctuary cities give sanctuary to killers and won't back down. So would this case have come out in any other way than what it did? I don't know. That's something you need to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that, my argument about gun control here, I'm 100% behind. Like if you've got a firearm or any other thing and you're being stupid with it and somebody dies, you need to pay the price for that. Not to say that I'm for gun control at all. Frankly, that's not even a gun control law, is it? No. It's a law about responsibility. It should be the same thing with a car. And most generally it is. Or any other thing that you've got. If you're just being stupid or negligent or just don't care and you kill somebody because of that, well, you have to pay the price for it. As far as guns go, I don't think the government, you cannot come up with a rational argument based on the Constitution. To me, Mr. Supreme Court Justice and Justicette, any rationale that says you, as the federal government, have any right to limit any weapon that anyone wants to have, including felons. Right? Now, I can see if you're a felon that's still under probation, certainly limit that. But once you've committed said felony, you've gone to the prison, you paid your debt to society, you're no longer under probation. In my opinion, there's no rationale at all that you can't have a firearm for self-defense or for any other purpose, right? If our justice system is good enough to punish the people and then they pay their debts to society, why is it that they don't get their full status? Why can't they vote? That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. As far as guns, though, should there be any prohibition against firearms for the righteous citizen? No. The only prohibition should be cost. All right? We should be able to have fully automatic weapons. I'm fine with that. RPGs, great. M1 Abrams tank, wouldn't that be fun? How about not an M16, but an F-16? Give me one of those. Yeah. Now, granted, I'm not going to last very long in that thing, because I'm going to get in it without any sort of flight suit or training. I'm just going to, let's go fly, baby. And it's right in the ground. It's my stupidity, and I'm paying for it. All right, that's it. Thank you for joining the show. Yes, MichaelNewmanProductions.com. Use the website you need to go to. That has all the links for the show from today and a whole lot more information, including, the services I can provide for you, voiceover services, production services, contact. You can send me an email. Go to Newmaniac1. Follow me on Twitter. Please share the videos. That helps me out a whole bunch. And please, let's get some people signing up for the Patreon deal. We got to make some money here, baby. I'm poor. I need help. Just click support. Support me, please, for God's sake. All right. Have a great evening.
Wow, see